Katie Howell at Immediate Future. And today, this is the first episode of a little series I'm running called We Don't Have Time for This. It's kind of for marketers who are, like every marketer, trying to do more with less. While buying decisions are getting messier, brands and content and social and search and all of this keeps getting judged almost like a nice to have. So we want to address this pain. And today's pain is really simple. You're marketing to 3 generations inside one buying group. And half the time you're guessing what will land and what will be trusted and what will get forwarded internally without you looking daft. So I've got a brilliant guest who's been with me before, Tejal Patel, and she's joining me as a customer first marketing leader, which is just with previous roles in Cisco, Microsoft, Nokia. She helps teams get a really clear perspective and get aligned and stop wasting time. And I love that. That's the bit that really, for me, gives us amazing insight. And making sure that we're fixing some of those fundamentals so that we have, better innovation, better growth, better commercials. So let's turn to Tejal, and I've got a series of questions that I would love you guys, and if I can get onto notes, I will make sure I'm keeping an eye on it. Please feel free to add in any questions that you have. And my first question for the day is, we got talking about this because you came back from a consumer event thinking B2B is behind. So go on, what did you hear, Tejal? What did you hear that made you kind of wince and go, we need to catch up?
Hello, first of all, for getting me involved in this conversation. I'm so glad when you and I were chatting, I think it was back end of last year, right, that we wanted to do a new podcast, and the Gen Z conversation came in. And I was telling you earlier, I'm obsessed suddenly with Gen Z because there's a lot of complexity going on with that generation that I think we need to really think about. But what really triggered it for me was an event I was invited to actually by this organization called the Connected Club. I did a video post on LinkedIn about it, and that's when my kind of brain started whirling around, well, what does all this mean for B2B? But it was a B2C event. It was, what I was really struck by was the behavioral insights at the event. What makes a generation tick? What are their fears? Who do they trust, don't trust? What are their aspirations? And it really took me back to that excitement I used to have when I worked in B2C, where there was that human centricity, which just permeates through B2C brands. And unfortunately, I hate to say it, I'd love for people to disagree with me who are listening to this or watching this now. I really don't hear enough of this language in B2B events. What's making the generation tick? What's making your buyer tick? What are they afraid of? Not just pain points around making a decision, but actually going much more deeper than that. So that really awoken this kind of excitement for me around, okay, hang on, there's a lot going on with Gen Z. By the way, and it's not just about Gen Z, because then the other thing is they're now, and Gen Zs are, I think the age range is around 15 to 29 right now. So they're well into the work, the top end of Gen Z. The older Gen Zs are well into the workforce, well established, maybe second or third job in, are getting into decision making, potentially influencing. And then they're working with millennials, the previous generation to them, and they're working with Gen X, which I think, Katie, you and I are kind of in the Gen X. And I think you were saying they're starting to kind of get squeezed out a little bit, but the seniority of decision makers is still the kind of Gen X. So you've got 3 generations, and then you've got this massively disrupted, aggrieved, we'll talk about that later, aggrieved generation who are really thinking and doing things in a different way. What does it mean for B2B marketers? So hence why we're here today. I got excited about that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think because it presents so many challenges. And you mentioned Gen Z, and we know millennials are the biggest cohort of B2B buyers. and that Gen Z is rising fast in that decision-making chain, we know that there was a really nice bit of data, which is Forrester says millennials and Gen Z now make up 71% of the B2B buyers, which is terrifying when you think about it. It's like, particularly for us Gen X, it's, like me.
Yeah.
But the other point I wanted to make was that even Forrester says, the state of in their latest state of business buying report, they say 13 people in the decision-making process, and 89% of them are from different departments. And so you kind of go, well, already my head is going, 3 generations of buyers, 13 people involved.
Yeah.
Oh my God, cross departments. So, with all of that in mind, oh my God, and we don't have any time. So when you say, what's generally different about what's going on in with our customers right now? What are the decision behaviors, and what's kind of staying the same?
Well, I think, first of all, the logic they've got to apply to decision making doesn't change, right? Everyone's got to go through the process of making a decision, reaching an agreement, and buying what they've got to buy for their organization. So it's still about verifying and gaining confidence in that decision making. So that's the kind of commonality. But I think what's changed is who and what they trust.
Yeah,
the proof and the evidence to support your marketing claims in your organization, in your messaging, that you've got to think a little bit about. But I think it's all about reducing risk and building confidence when it comes to B2B decision making. The first is your personal risks. How am I going to look? If I make a recommendation for this vendor, how is it going to reflect on me? It always starts with the me. And then you think about Gen Zs. I think there's a lot of me in there about that generation. The second is you've got to reduce organizational risk. So is this decision going to support what the company needs? Is there a fit there? And then I think the third area is, how am I going to build internal, and they're not necessarily using these words, but it's that internal confidence collectively in making that right decision. You've just said 13 potentially different people involved in the decision making, several different departments. So how are you arming each of those individuals in the buying group with the right information that they are not only convinced themselves, but they have something they can share? Forwardability is a thing to think about, not shareability, forwardability of that information that is going to help the next person in that buying committee to be convinced about the decision. So your job is not only to influence the buyer, but help them influence the next person, if that makes sense.
Absolutely makes it. And funny enough, I wrote a newsletter that was published yesterday talking a lot about lurkers and the fact that we have
Sounds a little bit
large amounts, something like 93% of sharing actually happens on dark social. So in other words, people snapshotting it and sending it. Now that in itself is, the bit we're blind to. We're used to this. We're marketeers. We've done this before. We had TV. We had radio. We've done all of these things. So we need to get less fearful about what's going on and make sure that our messages travel. And you mentioned something else there that really struck me. So we've been doing some research on Reddit about what tech buyers, are talking about. And by far, the biggest conversation is fear of failure, is the risk element, which is, as you say, is both personal and company-wide, which is, I don't want to make a decision that is going to come and bite me. And, in the current economic climate.
Yes, there's a lot of fear.
There's a lot of fear, and you can see it in, conversations about tech purchases have gone up something like 480% year on year on Reddit, just on Reddit.
Yeah.
And what you're seeing are people looking for that reassurance between each other. And that is just phenomenal. It's a complete market change.
Yeah, I mean, Reddit, I think that's a whole other, I'd love more conversations on Reddit. I think that's still untapped potential. And an area marketers need to be thinking about spending a bit more time in investing in hiring Redditors to work in those communities, because it's actually, by the way, double bang for your buck with things like communities, because it's also helping you get your optimization for AI and geo, and showing up in Gen AI for research purposes, right? The more citations you have with sources like Reddit, then the more likely your organization and your brand's going to show up. So yeah, I think thinking about that, and it happens to be where a lot of these buyers are going to get reassurance that they're on the right track with their decision making.
Yeah. And I think one of the questions then that occurs to me, that we're talking about time and the fact that we as marketeers don't have very much of it. So how can we avoid wasting time that, when we're trying to personalize for this massive buying group of multiple generations, multiple reasons to purchase, all that fear that will be different depending on what you're doing and what your role is. So how do we streamline? What's a smarter way to kind of create marketing that hits all the right buttons?
Yeah, personalization is an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think now you're hearing a lot more that for the first time ever, it's possible. Personalization is at scale, is finally a reality, because AI is giving you what you need, is speeding up your capabilities around personalizing content based on different buyers, based on different channels. But I think there is something to be mindful of there. First is these Gen Z, especially, back to them, they can smell AI generated content a mile away. There's increasing distrust. They're getting turned off by AI generated content. And you see it, by the way, and it's all sounding the same.
Yeah.
It's looking the same, all this kind of algorithmic sameness, which is that same tone coming across when you're hearing influencers even sometimes talking video content. It's all starting to sound the same. Written content is starting to sound the same, and they can smell that a mile off. So I think it's being a little bit, yes, there's a lot of positives there with AI. It's being a little bit mindful of it. But I think around personalization and what do we need to think about where you're not wasting your time, I think we need to shift to a proof-based content strategy. Where's the evidence at every stage of what that buyer journey is? What evidence are you providing around what your product can do that is going to validate your claim? So, that's from commercial proof. What's the business impact your product's going to have? What's the problem it's going to solve? I think we end up stopping there, by the way, most of the time with content. But then I think the next layer is, as you're going further into your research, it's kind of the operational proof. How does this product work in reality? Where has it not worked? That's the authenticity coming in, right? It's not always perfect. How have we developed the product where we've learned where it's not worked, to the reality of adoption or use, whatever it is that your product does. And then the third area, I think, is the peer proof, which is, okay, what our customers who've bought from us have said. So it's your case studies, it's your influencers, but it's all of those layers of proof and evidence being built into your messaging strategy that is going to provide, back to what we were saying earlier, confidence in the decision making to move further along that journey with your brand still in mind and you as a vendor still in mind. So I think that's important now, rather than some kind of big lofty claims, big brand activity that as a brand you're not going to get trusted as much. I think that's really important. But if someone else is saying it, or there's other evidence to back it up, there's more credibility.
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt, it means we need to think about leaning into our clients, customers, as well as obviously influencers. And I think one of the really interesting parts to this is that the world has changed so much, and AI has involved our buyers in the way they judge things. So there's actually quite an easy way to look at these pain points, and that is to look at the questions that our customers are asking. So when they want clarity, what are the answers they're looking for? And if you turn your marketing on its head a little bit and go, what does the customer need at this point? Then exactly that, you can then marry that to your proof points. You can then say, this is what sits, this is our truth statement, this is what we really fix, this is what we do. This, we're not the cheapest, but we're the, you know, and I think that is really exactly as you said, we need to show proof, and then we need to expand that proof and have other people talk about it.
And I don't know if this is relevant, but something else I want to make a point around is, you know, I mentioned about these different kind of proof points along the decision-making journey. But I think your role as a brand or a marketeer to educate your audience in your area, your field, so educational content throughout the buying process, which is continuously reinforced to your ICP, I think is useful because you're adding value. And the brand that comes to mind that I think does that really well is HubSpot. You know, I've been engaging more with HubSpot over the last year. There's so much amazing content they share for free that is educating me as a marketeer. And now I'm talking about HubSpot on a call with so many other people. So what does that say about their marketing working, right? It's a subtle way to do it. I've had value from it. And now I'm prepared to talk about, I think HubSpot's bloody brilliant. So,
and I think that's I think one of the really key things there is that you're not only are you adding value, but you're also adding thought leadership, because HubSpot does both. It does the, here's how you do this 101 kind of style. But here's also this really interesting, different way of thinking about things. And I think that is the bit that marketeers need to get to grips with, and kind of somewhat bully their colleagues and stakeholders into doing a lot more thought leadership.
Yeah, but you know, you feel this association with the brand because it's like, you know, HubSpot's helping me look smart.
Yeah.
And so what are you doing? Whether you're targeting, we talked about IT directors, didn't we, earlier? Everyone's targeting the IT director or IT manager or whatever. But what are you doing to make that person, that ICP, feel like they're smart? Like you improving their education levels in their area of expertise. And so if you're doing that as a brand, that's a type of loyalty, which is another thing to be thinking about. I'll be thinking enough about loyalty. They think about it all the time in B2C. I don't know if we think enough about it in B2B.
No. Really interesting question from my colleague CJ, which I'm going to read out because I think it's really poignant to where we are at the moment. If fear of failure is prevalent, who should be stimulating a drive to be bold and create? Is that the marketing director or the wider board? For teams to create full funnel content that truly impacts the customer journey, won't marketeers need enablement to create, fail, and then ultimately succeed? I think that is just cracking question, because that bit of allowing us as marketeers to consistently test and learn because our audience is doing that is massive. What do you think?
I think that's at a board level, or across teams. You know, I don't know if you have to go up to the board necessarily for that, but internal alignment. I know we said we're going to talk a bit about that later as well, but getting internal and not alignment based on data points you've seen that you want to test out, that data point and that insight you've gathered. It's got to be based on some sort of evidence you've seen, whether it's insight from a customer or win-loss reports that are showing you, look, we're consistently losing because of whatever it might be. We're not communicating, or people are not understanding something about our product. What can we do innovatively, creatively, that is going to address that current failure in our organization? Can we work with sales? Can we work with the product team? Here's what marketing is going to do. And we're going to work together to build out the strategy. And it's, in effect, tweaks to your go-to-market, which is always more than marketing. That's got to be involved in it. So I think it's, don't try and do things alone, is what my message would be to marketing teams. Please don't do it alone, because your job is not in isolation. it's with some really super smart teams and departments in your organization who are also very close to the customer, who also have their own perspective on insights. Bring that together and build a test plan of sorts that you can, and it may not work, by the way, but if you've based it on research, based it on, there's enough logic here to suggest why we need to go and give this a go. But if you've got people behind you and buying into trying it, if it does fail, nobody's going to point the finger because you haven't suddenly come out the woodwork and said, hey, marketing director has decided we're going to just go and do this, and you've not involved other people. That's when finger pointing happens.
Yeah.
It's very easy to blame other people when, well, I wasn't part of it. But if you were part of it, well, you don't want to say I failed. You'll probably be like, yeah, okay, look, we learned something from it. Let's tweak it and try it. So there is a human psychology there, I think, about a collective decision to do something.
Absolutely.
I hope that answers the question.
Totally, better than I did anyway. And actually, that kind of brings me on to, how do you stop, there's multiple customer bases or decision makers. How do you stop it turning into lazy stereotypes? What are the guardrails that you put in place to keep it kind of grounded in context and jobs to be done and the reality? Because otherwise, when I look at this Gartner stat, which talks about the fact that, so many of our buyers are actually avoiding talking to us. So they're doing the rep-free buying, which means there's even more kind of for us as marketeers to focus in on. So how do you avoid stereotyping it all and just turning it into AI, AI slop that we were talking about earlier?
Yeah, it is becoming lazy, isn't it, by the way? I think that's the thing with AI. I'm a big fan, but if your default is always you're going to go to AI, you're not flexing your own brain muscles. And by the way, there is another separate piece of research I was reading about, back to the Gen Z bit. They really have also got increasing skepticism about AI around. They're not getting the opportunity to learn and make mistakes and learn through experience. They're just defaulting, and they don't like the idea of just defaulting to AI. But I think the lazy stereotypes, we're talking a lot about generations here, but I don't think you can target by age in what we're doing. That's a really weak proxy. I think it's got to be back to that decision context. So what decisions are they accountable for? And what happens if they get it wrong? I think it's that risk factor again. There's so much fear. So what are you doing to build confidence, reduce risk, and understanding who do they need to convince internally for this decision to go through? So you can't have an individual that you are targeting in your ICP. It's not just one person. That's such a load of crap. There are, how many was it? You said 13 people on average involved. And you're not going to have the budget to target all 13. I'm not saying that, but there is a combination of paid, organic, a messaging strategy that is going to target a high percentage of that buying group. But you've got to understand who that buying group is. And I think that's where you've got to get your brains on a little bit, is how are you going to reduce that risk anxiety? Because that looks the same. Everyone, like we said that earlier, doesn't matter on the generation, they're all afraid of failing and how they're going to look, and are they helping to drive that decision? And do they look good in all of this as well, that, hey, they played a really good role, positive role in making the right decision? So there are commonalities there. So that's where you can become more cost effective, more efficient, because you're going for the common things that each of these generations are caring about, and target on that basis, or build your messaging on that basis.
And it can be so much simpler. I mean, the amount of times I get told in B2B tech, particularly, we're after CIOs, CTOs.
CISOs, and
so those will be the little group of three. And actually, when you, like I said, when you go to Reddit, when you go and look at what's going on in social, and I'll be really interested to know what you think, is what you're actually seeing are the questions being asked, the problems that they're trying to address. And that can cross the generations. So, I mean, I'd be interested to know what you think in terms of, you know, what you're seeing on social or elsewhere in these behaviors. How are they showing up? What do you see changing in how each I hate to say generation, is it generation, or each problem is being addressed?
Yeah. I think we talked a bit about the proof bit earlier, didn't we? And building evidence into every stage of that buyer journey. But that evidence looks different for each generation. Gen Z don't trust institutions, they don't trust big brands, governments. They are much more likely to look across for validation and for confirmation of the decision they want to make. When I say look across, I mean proximity to them in their peers, people who look like them, part of their community. So how are you taking that into account? If you are just saying as a brand and you're a big established brand, and of course you like trusted in the kind of B2B tech world, for example, that's not enough. That's just because you've said it that you deliver some such and such thing, or you are the number one in cybersecurity. That's not enough because Gen Z is not going to trust what you're saying. So how are you building in other sources of evidence and proof as part of your strategy that is going to help? So I think in social media is thinking about, it's back to the simplicity of, you've got one case study or one messaging cornerstone narrative, but how you're going to split it up into many different kind of elements that addresses the needs of different generations, but also what role they're playing within the buying group. But that's a very effective way to do it. It's one overarching story, but you've shown it from different lenses and you've layered in evidence from commercial impact this product's going to have, to how do you implement it, to what's the proof of what other customers have done. And I know that sounds easy saying it, but investing that time and effort up front, you can get such legs out of that for months and months and months in terms of your content strategy, because you've done all of that thinking up front and thought of all the angles and thought about your different generational challenges. And I think you're not having to repeatedly create net new content. I don't know if that makes sense again.
It's like, oh, I'm going to clip this and quote it everywhere because it is spot on. We spend so much time trying to create new content and we need to cover this and we need to when actually we need 2 or 3 really good pieces of content that we then shatter under different lenses. Exactly what you're saying. I absolutely categorically believe that is a better way forward, that we, and you know, we have a terrible habit, and I'm just as bad as everybody else. We have a terrible habit in marketing, which is we get bored with our own messaging, don't we?
We do. Yes.
On the assumption,
data, isn't there like data that shows marketing people have got bored of the content way earlier than your buying group ever noticed that, oh, they've got content fatigue. There's a big disparity there. So it's like, yeah, we're kind of doing this to entertain ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think we just have to keep going. We have to be disciplined. And, you know, one of the ways I do it, for instance, is, you know, I'll rotate things. And that means I get a little bit of, you know, because we're staring at the damn things the whole time, aren't we? It gets really boring.
And it doesn't have to be polished, by the way. That's the other thing is I think we get a little bit obsessed about high quality, high production value content for social media, especially. I actually think the more authentic it is and kind of rough and ready in some ways, the more traction it's going to gain. And I know we're seeing more of that with thought leadership. We're seeing a lot more senior executives and CEOs kind of, you know, 2 camera pieces to their phone, walking, whatever they're doing. I think that's good.
Yeah.
I think that's good to be just a little bit, it doesn't have to be super polished. It doesn't have to be some really well thought out script. Are you adding value with what you're saying? And is it delivered in an authentic way is going to resonate more?
Yes. And we've gotten, I'll tell you who I've always loved by the way they do this, which is they're not quite as raw as, you know, the CEO walking in the forest or whatever and chatting, but they bring their persona, and it is a consumer brand, and that's the First Direct. I if you receive a letter or an email from First Direct, I feel like they're human beings.
Yeah,
You know,
I've heard a lot about how good they are with their personalization and humanness. Yeah.
We need to get back into that, and I do think, you know, we've talked about this before, it's just knowing our customers a bit better. That kind of silliness or the edginess of being a little bit more raw brings me on to the next question for you. So TikTok in B2B, I mean, is it useful? When is it a distraction? When should we be in the TikTok debate? Should B2B be there?
I'm not sure yet where I sit on that, but I was blown away at back to this B2C event I went to back end of last year. I was blown away by social commerce and what is happening on TikTok, the TikTok shops, the live, it's QVC for a new generation. And maybe not everyone who's watching today is going to even know what I'm talking about with QVC, but that live shopping, live prices, discounting, flash sales within a particular hour or a window. You're seeing the product get demonstrated. There's all sorts of incentives and offers to purchase within a certain window. I mean, some of the businesses that are super successful in TikTok, it really blew my mind when I saw some of that. I do wonder whether there's the low friction, easy to buy B2B products. Yeah, why shouldn't you be on TikTok?
Yeah.
If it's very low friction, requires very little thought process to purchase, and you'll know what that average buying cycle looks like. I mean, if it is literally quite a commodity style product, maybe you should be on TikTok, and you've got an ability to demonstrate it with the product expert, and that person can buy it. Unfortunately, I think with most B2B products, they are still very long-winded buying processes. And by the way, isn't the buying cycle going up as well? The time to purchase. I don't know what the data is there, but that's going up.
Well done. So I dug this out, and sorry, I need my glasses on because I've written it really small. B2B International found millennials spend 13 weeks in the initial research phase versus 12 weeks for Gen X versus 8 weeks for boomers. So yeah, they're taking it, and that's just the research phase, let alone anything else.
Yeah, so I mean, I'd almost say TikTok is still, I'd love to know, by the way, any brands out there, B2B brands, who are successfully investing or creating content for TikTok. And I think that would be great to see what's happening on there. But my tendency would be to lean towards something like YouTube. Great for product demos and great for all of that. That is going to be, you can build a great strong library there, very referenceable back into AI. Communities like Reddit is where I would say, but I think the message here from me would be, don't try and be everywhere. Do well with the channels you are already investing in. Yeah. If you kind of half-assed where you are already and now you want to go and add TikTok and you want to add YouTube, you've just created another channel that needs managing, that needs maintaining, that needs continuous content. Do you have the bandwidth for that, the resource for that, the budget for that? Yeah. So ask yourself those questions before you decide, right, TikTok's like the raging new, channel in B2B. I need to go on there. So you've got to be a little bit pragmatic there in the decisions you make.
So bringing us back to time, the hidden cost quite often for us marketeers is actually internal, the committees, the creating more work because another department wants you to do something and blah, 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 So how do we win back time? Because it's a real challenge, isn't it? Particularly because we need the time to think.
Do you mean kind of internally? How do you get aligned? Or
yeah, because I feel like sometimes internally you've talked a little bit in the past with me about how teams need to brief themselves, and to write proper briefs internally. And it does make me think, how do we, given this sort of slightly messy purchase thing, what's the kind of smallest bit of insight we need? How can we can move fast, but not spend day after day in committee meetings with our internal teams?
Yeah. So, by the way, speaking about briefing, I think that is a lost art. I remember not growing up, but earlier in my career, that was really drilled into me, the art of briefing, a really clear, documented brief for agencies, whoever, agency partners that I worked with at the time. And I learned the better the brief, the better the outcome.
Yeah.
The clarity, because you've sat down and you've really thought about what you're trying to achieve. And I would actually ask that question, people listening, watching this, how often are you briefing? What does your brief look like? Is it just a quick email or a Slack message or something? Hey, I need this. We need to do this. This is the deadline. Get it done.
Yeah.
Whether that's internal, right? I know a lot of creative development happens in-house, or media buying is happening in-house. How are you actually doing the briefing here? Because what you're putting in, if it's crap, you're going to get crap out. So I do like the idea of internally briefing and getting aligned internally. I don't think marketing's got an execution problem. I think we are all good at execution. We are all working our socks off. There is no doubt about it. Every person, I'm sure, will resonate if I say you're probably doing the job of two people, at least 1.5 to 2 people. And now the expectation with AI is, well, then you should be able to do work for 3 people, right? So we're all working really hard, but is it smart? Have we aligned with people internally? Have we got people on board? Are we clear about who we're targeting? I was talking to someone yesterday who, in the private equity world, who's got a whole portfolio of companies. They manage large enterprise companies. And I was asking the question, what are the challenges you're finding with marketing and the marketing teams you're working with in your portfolio companies? And one of the first things she said to me is they seem to struggle to define their ICP. And these are big companies already making billions of dollars of revenue, but they are not clear about their ICP. So I know we're shaking our heads, but I mean, it's like, it's really common. I've only got one ICP. It's like the IT director. Is it really? So I think being clear about the buying group, your ICP, that I think is really important to think about. What's the commercial outcome? Whatever piece of activity you're doing, or a program you're launching, or a campaign you're launching, what is the commercial imperative there? What proof assets exist? Do you have? And I saw this all the time, by the way, at my previous employer, who I won't name, but there'd be all sorts of, we're going to do this. We want this campaign out, and we want to talk about this, and we want to be in these channels, and it needs to be live in the next 4 weeks. Do we have the content? Do we have the right assets that support what you're saying? Most of the time we don't. So I think it's getting all of those things aligned. And then I think one of those questions that came in earlier about that enablement part, how are you then also getting that content or that plan communicated internally? So sales are aware of it, that we're doing this, and what's the impact on them, and how are they going to have consistent messaging on their side when they are speaking with customers as well. So what's the sales enablement process look like? What about customer service? What about post-purchase? You've got to think again through the entirety of that journey. Are all the different departments synced up? And I think that's where the internal briefing comes in, and being clear that marketing is not working in isolation.
And in fact, this brings me, CJ's asked another rather cute question, because that fits really. Should a member of the team be tasked with to own the customer lens to ensure content truly resonates? And I think this is really important, is that you will avoid the brief that just talks about the IT director or the CTO or whatever it is, if you know your customer. I just feel like somebody should own that. or maybe that's just me.
Well, I think this is where AI can help, right? You can build your personas out, whether it's a gem you create with Gemini or custom GPTs with ChatGPT that are internally shareable across teams. But, you build out, this is the ICP or in the buying group. These are the different personas within it, what they care about. Use all of your internal data. There's so much internal data available. Are you listening to conversations, social listening? What does your win-loss report say? What are the chats people are having? Do you use chat bots? What kind of conversations are happening there? You've got all of that to feed into the personas you build out. You can have them within your using your agents, AI agents, and feed in your messaging into there.
Yeah.
Like, hey, this messaging for procurement persona, whatever, for Jill in procurement. Is it going to, by the way, we should name personas. B2C brands always name a persona. Why don't we do that in B2B?
So I don't know. They'd all be called Dave or Bob.
So Jill Smith in procurement, is this messaging going to resonate based on what we know about that persona? And then you've got your validation of yes or no, or you need to build this in, or it's missing this.
Yeah.
You don't need to do expensive research anymore.
No, and I'll tell you, social is such a, of course I'd say that, but having just done that Reddit research and also, using tools like Brandwatch or Global Web Index, and we have the work platform for Global Web Index, which is just phenomenal. It is being able to go, well, what are the attitudes? What are the values of this by job title? What are their values? And then using what's happening in social media to really steer you. So if you don't have customer insight, there is customer insight all over there, so that I think we sometimes
so much insight.
And it can seriously, I can pull out data and have an ICP listing in 48 hours. That's how fast I can move to help people surface the questions that their buyers are asking. Where do they want answers? Where do they need help? And then you can line those up to your proof.
And the customers who've bought from you, do you ever talk to them?
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, marketing, get involved in talking to your customers. Why did that customer, that account, that company buy from you? What tipped them over in the end after that 3-month buyer journey, 12 weeks of research? What was it? And how do we do more of it? How do we get more customers like that one? I think we need to be getting out of our marketing bubbles a little bit and doing some of this.
Yeah. In the nicest possible way. I think we'll have fun with it as well. And
it will. It's going to make our work more impactful. So you're doing it so your team looks brilliant because you've got all the data to back it up.
And that you're not a factory churning out content, spewing out
AI-generated content,
or even other. I mean, the amount of webinars I say, just come to our webinar, come to stand 235, blah, blah. It's like, even I wouldn't, you must be bored. I always think you must be bored with yourself, because surely there's more exciting things to say.
Yeah.
Bringing us back to this time for this, we don't have time for this. What do you think we should stop doing this quarter to make time for this insights and planning? What do you think we should actually stand down?
I don't know what it means for each individual team or organization, but I think we keep adding lots of priorities to our list. And then there's last minute things that are constantly coming in. And the fear factor, again, means we never say no to it. So I would say, based on my experience and having worked with quite a few different diverse clients in my new sort of consulting world over the last year, I think we are getting pulled into more and more meetings. You've got to cut back on some of them. Why is it that you have more than one person in your team in the same meeting when it's with other stakeholders? Sometimes it's like, does it need 2 of you? That's 2 man hours, double the man hours that you've wasted being in that 1 hour call. when actually one of you can do it, especially with all the, transcribing tools we have now, and you've already got a representative. So I would say with this meeting fatigue is getting really bad. And it's so refreshing, the world that I live in now. And I think it's similar for you, Katie. You don't get dragged into every single meeting that is for the sake of it. And you've got time to think and do the work. So I think the question I would say, and it sounds like a very sort of basic, it's not even about marketing. It's about, do you need that meeting? Is there another way this conversation can happen or this decision can get made? If it has to be a meeting, who needs to be there? Is one person enough? It's amazing if you look at your calendar, how much of your time you can free up by just looking at that. But I think also knee-jerk things is another thing. Are we saying yes to knee-jerk that isn't based on any data or any facts? Go and do this. Go and we need to, whatever it might be. There's a new thing launching next week. I want a campaign out next week. I've got £50,000 here for you to just add to do a new campaign. Can you get it done next week? No, that kind of stuff doesn't happen just in a week.
No.
So I think planning is so important. If you have a strategic plan or an annual plan, a North Star for your team, it becomes much easier to make your decisions defensible. No, and say no, because it's like, no, we're not doing that because it's not laddering up to the North Star we have all collectively agreed on. These are my top 3 priorities. And honestly, and I'm not just saying that as, oh, well, that's easy for me to sit here. I'm saying that from having lived this in corporate world where I've been very methodical and very obsessive about planning with my team. And therefore, that's given them the permission to say no, because we're clear about why this team exists and what our priorities are. So you've got to create that time to plan, to bring in those insights. And then that gives you the headspace to build out a strategy and content and things that is usable multiple times. I mean, the time it's going to save you later is, I think, phenomenal. It's ROI in itself.
Yeah. And it is about, as I think you've said before, and when we've chatted, is this slowing down to move faster. And it has been absolutely, the last couple of years have been chaos and busy. And the world keeps changing. Yeah, absolutely. But now we need to be focused and have an investment of time in clarity, setting those priorities and going, right, okay, if we are going to actually move the needle commercially in the business, how are we really going to do it? And I think that's probably the most important thing for us to do. So one way I carve out time for myself is I book it in advance, because it stops the meetings, sliding in there, going, then suddenly I'm very distracted, and I'm easily distracted anyway. So I really don't need any help on that one. So I book the time and then go do it.
Yes, that's exactly my strategy. I block out bits of time, whether it's a reminder of I've got to email someone, or I've got to follow up with someone, to time to write this piece of document or work on this strategy or whatever it is. Having blocks of time really holds you accountable. Sometimes you have to move that block because something has come up, but the fact that it's in your calendar means I think you're going to be held more accountable to yourself to get it done. But it's that discipline, right? You've got to have the self-discipline. Otherwise, we're all going to run around in this kind of chaotic way, doing a lot of work, but the impact is there.
Yeah.
And it's got to be the other way around, And
particularly, as you rightly said, we're talking to multi-generations. We're talking to people who have, it's not one buying decision, it's 13 buying decisions. It's not 1 week, it's 13 weeks. It's all of these things. And we're in danger of just, as you rightly said, marketeers are doing the job of 2 people. What are we going to do when we have to do the job of 3? So
it's coming, right? So that's where you've got to get super clear about your priorities and what is your North Star.
Indeed. Just as always, and I could absolutely talk to you for about another hour, and I know we could just chat.
It's been fun. I've loved it. Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. And you've really made me think, which is always the the sign of what works and what doesn't work when you're talking to somebody and you think, yeah, those proof points, and I can think of where we need to do ours. So, yeah,
and I need to apply this to myself as well in my business. But I hope it's been useful for your viewers today, and hopefully we get questions, right, and feedback, whatever. That would be good to know.
Always here for anyone who has questions. Both me and Tejal are really happy with this idea of sharing information, helping people upskill, or if you've got a particular challenge, no matter what it is. We've been in marketing long enough that usually we've seen it before. Usually.
Yeah.
So approach us. We're very approachable sort of people, really.
Totally. Happy to help.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for spending time with us.